Just a reminder that our interviews today are sponsored by the Legal Burnout Solution. You can visit legalburnout.com/community to learn about their free online meditation community. The organization is run by the terrific Cynthia Sharp and Rebecca Howlett, and I highly recommend getting to know them. Now it is time to meet the final guest of our law firm summer reboot camp. She is the CEO and founder, like she mentioned, of the Williams Law Group, additionally runs a company called Law Firm Mentor, which provides business coaching services for solo and small law firm attorneys. Alison Williams is our event closer today. Welcome to the event, Allison. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to ask you first and foremost, what are some of the biggest reasons that growing law firms tend to either fail or end up never reaching their like full potential?
Well, the answer is always the one that most people don't want to hear, but it's always about the owner. The owner either gets to a place where they can't pile on anymore onto themselves, and they feel that they can't hire people that are effective at doing the work that they want them to do. So they make a decision, they're just going to hunker down, do as much as they can themselves, work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, or work less and simply make less money. That's one pathway. Another pathway is they do decide to grow and they start strategically growing, but then what happens is they kind of hit that ceiling where they don't know what the next step is, and doing more of the same thing is not going to work. So adding another lawyer when you have enough work and you can expand it a little bit doesn't work. You add another paralegal, it doesn't work. And at a certain point, when you start growing and you're scaling, oftentimes your need for management is going to eat up your profit. So if you don't learn how to get through, typically it's that $2 to $5 million mark. A lot of lawyers just kind of hit that wall there and say, I can't grow beyond this because economically it's not in my best interest and it's too much work.
I think one of the, and this sticks out in my head, is the best thing that I remember you saying from our time together on when you joined our podcast was, whenever I'm feeling a little bit of burnout, I need to make more profit. I need to make more money. So can you identify when you get to that point, like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? And then how do you go about deciding how to solve the problem by making more profit?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's different for everyone, right? Everyone has a different stress level, a different point where they're just kind of tired of the business. And I'm not talking about kind of we all have a bad day. If you're lawyering, you're dealing with people and their problems, right? And so sometimes people and their problems can wear us out. But we all hit that point at some point in a day. I'm talking about a sustained period where day after day after day, you're questioning, why am I doing this with my life? There are easier ways to make money. I don't enjoy this anymore. And I typically will find that I hit that point when I'm not enjoying the type of work that I'm doing. So I'm somebody that is always looking for the newest thing, not necessarily shiny object syndrome, but I need new challenges to keep myself excited. And when I don't have them, I tend to get bored and I tend to get frustrated. So for me, when I experience that, the first thing I always need is more money. And that's not because I need to enjoy more money. I don't need more money in my pocket or in my bank account. I need it so that I can ultimately be able to better my best with more people. It typically means I need to fire myself from something that I don't enjoy. And I need to give that work to somebody who has a zone of genius for it and an aptitude and an interest in it that I don't have. And almost invariably, when I start creating jobs, that's when I start finding myself excited again, because I have then the time to do what I want to do. I have the time to create new businesses. I have the time to explore my personal interests, and I don't have a lock to a 9 to 5 that locks me into doing things that I have to do. Everything then becomes a choice.
I think it's funny that you talk about yourself and like, I have to fire myself so that I can do something else. But I think it's important to kind of outline how we get to a place where we can systematize, because I know you talk about systematizing everything, but systematize not only like a task, but when you start having all these systems in place, that's when you start outlining the need for additional work and like a job for a specific person. So I know that you believe it's really important for lawyers to systematize just about every single aspect of the firm. Can you tell us why it is that using systems is so important and how you've used them in your practice over the years?
Yeah. So, I mean, systems create freedom. I mean, in a nutshell, one of the reasons why we are so tired at the end of a workday in the average law firm is not because you are doing physically tiring work, right? It's not, you're not like out in the sun lifting bricks. You're not stressing your muscles beyond all belief. It is that your mind is physically tired. So just think about the average day. For those of you that practice law actively, think about what it is to get to the office. You have 10 things on your list of things to do. You get to none of them because there's an emergency after another, after another, after another. You're in chronic interruption mode by team members. And by the end of your day, your mind has been scattered all over the place and you're just worn out, right? So that feeling is oftentimes the product of not having a highly structured, systematized day. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have every nanosecond of your day put into a system to the point where you have constricted all creativity. But you do need to have a system for what is going to happen in every function in your business so that you don't have the surprises that people believe are inherent to owning a law firm. And I say people believe it because as a family law attorney by trade, I was in a practice area where my clients almost universally are in distress. You know, I'm dealing with people's children being put in foster care, people getting restraining orders against their spouses, people having financial resources cut off from them. It's a distressed practice area. And people believe that that was emergencies. And I got my systems in my business functional to the point where rarely did we have an emergency. Sure, the nature of the work would have some emergencies. So the client might have an emergency. But if the client had an emergency, we even had a process for what we would do when there would be an emergency that was a real emergency that then required things to shift. And what I found by that is my lawyers were happier. I was happier. I was able to keep the environment where people worked peaceful, seamless. We were moving things along so that people had time to hang out at the water cooler without having to count every nanosecond. And I have to have people clocking in and clocking out for bathroom breaks. I didn't have to have an environment where if somebody took a day, took a week, or if we gave them extended bereavement leave, I was concerned about the bottom line. Those things went away when we had everything systematized. So people would normally say to me, well, I understand that for a law practice, right? I understand how you need to have systems and structure for your legal work, but what else? And I would tell them it's everything else. So just by way of example, one of the things that I know lawyers talk about a lot is marketing, right? How do you get more butts in seats? How do you get more people through the door? And when we talk about marketing and we talk about systematizing marketing, most people immediately think about a digital marketing company. But I told an audience that I spoke to once that I had a dialed in system for speaking engagement such that any time that I spoke on certain stages, I knew the economic value of the stage. Like I could tell you, if I speak for this organization, that's a $30,000 month that we're going to have in the next 3 months over as a result of that speaking engagement. And I didn't do anything other than show up and deliver the speech. And people would ask me, well, is that because you're saying the same thing over and over again? And I would say, no. Typically, I've spoken on 15 to 20 legal topics. And those are the areas where someone might call me an expert, if you were allowed to use that word. And so when I have made my calendar for the year, I've sat down with my marketing assistant and I will say, okay, I want to speak on X number of stages, these counties, you know, let's plan out the revenue from that, et cetera. And she does everything else. So she's the person who is calling the organization to get the booking. She's the person who is deciding what the organization is going to hear from me on, or if the organization says we want her to speak on X, she will confirm that. And then she will pull my notes out of various speeches that I've given over the years, and she will put them together into a speech for me. I am not involved. Literally, the only thing that I do is the week of the speech, she will give me a little folder that says, okay, here's where you have to be. You're scheduled for Thursday at 12 p.m. in front of this organization. You know, I've ordered your lunch, it's XYZ. After the lunch, you're going to be speaking for about 45 minutes. Here are your notes. Go. That's all. And people said, well, how are you not the person that's deciding what you're going to speak on? And how are you not the person that's talking to the event coordinator to make sure that everything is running seamlessly. And I said, well, because we have a system for that, you know? And my marketing assistant would lead the charge, but she wasn't the only person involved. So there were people that she had authority over to whom she would delegate things such as putting together our marketing materials, such as making sure that our opt-ins were available so that as people wanted to gain access to free materials, the text responder was available. She would make sure that the slide deck had the right text responder on there because we have different responders for different assets that we're going to give out. And all of that was planned really without my involvement because I didn't have the expertise to do it. I didn't have the knowledge or the wherewithal. I wanted to make speaking into an ongoing profit generator for my law firm. So I said to my team, we need to find out a way to do this. She did the research. Okay.
I want to read this question just in case anybody who can't see this in the chat is watching. Lisa Meggs. Lisa, I appreciate your engagement all day. You've been a lot of fun. She says, oh, a family lawyer. I would love to know more about your systems. I do primarily family law and my clients think everything is an emergency.
Yeah. So for family law and for any area of law, actually, you have to educate your clients before the relationship starts as to what is and is not an emergency from a legal perspective. So after a client in my office, we have a salesperson who sells the client. After the salesperson has converted the client, that's when they have the right to contact and have their first steps with their legal team. They meet their paralegal, they meet their lawyer. In the very first meeting with the paralegal, that's when they get our policies and procedures for the office. And the paralegal actually goes over certain things because we know that the person's excited and ready to get started and they're anxious. And we want to start giving them education about how to work with us and how to get the best result for them. So that starts with an explanation of the fact that there are certain things that feel like an emergency that will trigger some type of legal action, but don't require emergent legal action. So for instance, family law, if you have an agreement that your child is to be returned to you at a set time and your child is not returned, that might feel like an emergency when your child is 10 minutes late. It might be an emergency when your child is not returned 24 hours later. There's a distinction, right? Either one may prompt the client to want to call the office. Sometimes when a client calls the office, they speak to an emergency available person right away. So it could be their legal team assigned, or it could be any other legal professional in the office. We are all trained to deal with certain issues. There are other times when they call the office and they're scheduled to speak with their legal team, as opposed to I call the office and I get a lawyer. For the most part, people don't call my office and have an expectation that they can get a lawyer on the phone the moment they call. Messages are taken, calls are scheduled. And it's really important that clients have that expectation going in so that every communication you have with the client educates them about the next point of contact that they're going to have, which reduces their anxiety level of calling and calling and calling, feeling like I'm never going to get my lawyer, so I have to keep calling and bugging them. We reduce that by virtue of giving them education. Another thing that's really great for family lawyers, as well as any other type of practice area, is that I highly recommend that you structure your day in a way that there is a block of time that is kind of what I refer to as the office hours, right? It's the time that is the scheduled hours of calls for people and any type of return communications that you need. So you can have a block of time for your emails to be returned, a block of time for calls that came in earlier that day that had a quick message that you could relay a message back to your team members. You could do that, but you also want to have a block of time where you're not, structured on an activity, right? You have what I would refer to as free time. And that is because there is always going to be stuff that comes in during the course of the day that if you don't leave time for it to be addressed, it tends not to get addressed until after hours, the weekends, or time when something else should be addressed. So you're kind of always kicking the can. You need to have what I refer to as that kick the can time on your calendar. And the more you get into the habit of functioning that way, the easier it is for other people to work with you so that your team is helping you, so that people that are interacting with you outside of the office know when to reach you, don't have expectations set that they're going to get you right away. And the hardest part about that is usually with the lawyer, right? Because we're kind of an instantaneous response people, right? That dopamine hit that we get once we knock something off our calendar tends to come up. This is a very easy way for you to start to educate yourself not to be reactive to to everything that comes in and to be responsive.
You just blew my mind. That was such a great answer. And I want to follow up because what you've talked about is having really it's all your systems basically working together in conjunction to make sure that your clients are aware of what their process is going to be, and that they don't feel the need to call you because they're not confused, right? They've been brought along through your systems. But I want to talk about getting to that point where you successfully systematize the practice and really getting buy-in from the people that work in your practice. So do you feel that the staff members should be part of creating the systems in the workplace? And how important is their input on how the systems get created so that you can work more efficiently?
So I absolutely believe that your team members should be involved with creating the systems for their roles. When I first started the process of creating systems beyond, right, like not just legal work, because a lot of people are competent attorneys by the time that they decide to open a law firm. Some people are not, some people go right out of law school, but a lot of us work somewhere, we understand the practice of law. But I am not a legal secretary. I was never trained as a legal secretary. I was never trained as a file clerk, never trained as a marketing assistant, never trained as a receptionist. And it's so much more important to have the person who's actually doing the work systematize the work, right? You can teach someone all that you want to, how you want things done. But here's the thing, like we all have this, especially litigators, okay? So for the litigators that are out there, I'm about to pick on you because I'm picking on myself because I'm one of you. You know, we have big egos, right? We go in and we fight the good fight. We have to stand up to be attacked in a courtroom. That is a very ego draining, if not ego building experience. Every win builds it up and every loss can knock it down. So we oftentimes feel like we are at the center of our universe and therefore we are the best suited to do things. And the reality is someone who's been a paralegal for 15 years or 5 years, frankly, is better trained at being a paralegal than you are. They're probably going to be able to tell you, here's how I go about this particular task. And they're probably going to be able to give you ideas and suggestions and recommendations for how to be more efficient at it that you're not aware of. So the very first thing that I highly recommend you do is bring your staff on board with the idea that they're going to participate in this. Now, this doesn't mean you shut down your office for weeks at a time to build systems. This means that it gets worked in the same way that you work in everything else. Just as you need to have that kick the can time for you, you need to have that for your staff so that they can do things like building systems. And once you have your systems, for the most part, built, once you have at least functionally sales, marketing, legal work, communications, facilities, money management, all of it in communications, once you have those categories, those domains of activities built out, then every person that comes in is still going to be trained on systems, but not just here's how we do it, but here's how we created it. So that every person has a responsibility anytime there is a problem to systematize the solution, right? You're not looking for someone to come in and follow your instructions. You want people to have contribution to their workday. That's how you get loyalty. That's how people have buy-in. That's how you reduce the return on people seeking the next dollar or seeking the next opportunity. It's because their minds get stale following your instructions all day. So you really want to give people an opportunity to contribute. Now, that doesn't mean that you hand over the keys to the kingdom and you walk away and hope that they don't screw it up. You have to give them an opportunity to contribute, but ultimately someone is going to check that the system is an appropriate system. And at some point, as the system is not working for you anymore, someone is probably going to contribute to changing the system.
For anyone tuning in a little late, welcome to our law firm summer reboot camp. I don't want to take away too much time because Alison Williams is just spitting facts right now, but my name is Nick Werker. Today we're focused on law office management. Here with me is Alison Williams, a business coach for the company Law Firm Mentor. And I always love referencing your podcast, which is called Crushing Chaos, for anybody who's interested. And I wanted to cover something that you brought up recently on an episode of your show, which is you were talking about finding like comfort and efficiency in delegation, and said that attorneys need to find a rhythm for how they delegate. Can you talk about what like the rhythm for delegation means exactly?
So there's a couple of different ways to look at delegation, right? I think a lot of us think of it as it's on my desk and I have to give it to someone else to complete a task that ultimately then completes the project. That's one way of looking at it. But in order to get to a law firm that runs without you, you need to delegate the responsibility, not just the task. In other words, when things come in, there are some things that you never see, that you're never involved in, that someone else is taking responsibility for before it even gets to you. And that rhythm has to be created at the stage of growth that you're in relative to what you are creating. So if your plan is to create a business where you're going to be the primary attorney and you're going to have other attorneys working alongside you and perhaps some paraprofessional staff, then you're probably always going to have some things that are paraprofessional activities, some things that are lawyer activities, and you're going to have to decide what those are and itemize them so that people know as soon as a document comes in, whose responsibility is it, and at what point does it get transferred to the next person. You also want to establish a rhythm of giving information and receiving information back. So we just had a big conversation about this. This is one of the things that's coming up for people that are interested. We actually have a program called Intro to Law Firm Freedom that's coming up in September. That's all about how to get your team to a place where ultimately your business runs without you. But in the process of talking about this with our community, we have well over 100 members of the Law Firm Mentor community now. And within that, when people bring up issues, we like to kind of do debriefs. So we do what we refer to as Coach's Corner every week. Every time someone has a problem, we have solutions that are taught to the community. And delegation is one that comes up over and over again. So we did this whole training about how when you are at the stage of just getting team members in, you have to be very intentional about having meetings with your team members where there's a certain amount that's going out and a certain amount that's coming back. And that can be, for instance, a Monday and Thursday meeting, right? The Monday meeting, I'm giving you 5 things that are coming up on our case list that I want done by Thursday. And Thursday, you get those items back and you can ultimately say, okay, I need to review them and get them either back to you by Monday, or we're done with it as soon as I'm done, whatever changes I've got to make to get it out. You want to get into that rhythm of things that are big projects. And then the smaller projects, you want to be coming back and forth, right? So you're either going to have some type of communication channel like Slack or Teams, or even having a daily end of day check-in where little things are transferred in that same way back and forth. And you want to keep track of it in some type of electronic format so that everyone has access to it, so that if someone is not on schedule, you can adjust the schedule before a deadline is missed. So ideally, if you gave someone an assignment, let's say on a Monday, and you expect it back on Friday, and you see that your taskmaster would say that they have something that has to be done on that project by Wednesday, and then the ultimate deadline is Friday, but they haven't touched it yet and it's Thursday, well, you're going to see that by virtue of having it available in electronic format. But you have to create that in a systematic way. And typically, you're going to want to have some control over that when you first start. That might not be the same as when you have a working relationship with someone, or even once you've decided that you don't want to have that same type of relationship, right? Training up a brand new paralegal, this might be required. Coming in with a 20-year seasoned professional, you might say, let's see what our work process looks like, and then we can just meet once a week. Or maybe even we meet every other week and everything is electronic in between. You have to find what works for you, but the point is, you should be very intentional about giving work and receiving work back with deadlines and asking people to ask you questions so that as they are learning your system, everyone's on the same page with it. Far too often, lawyers just kind of dump and run, right? Run into court. All right, I need this done by the end of the week. Here you go. And that communication hits them, but it doesn't land, right? It just kind of hits and bounces off as they're moving on to the next thing. So that's one of the things that we actually teach here at Law Firm Mentor is how to really get your team on board with getting information back and forth so that delegation becomes just another thing that you do in the course of a day, like checking your calendar or checking your email.
I've never heard it summed up so well, because we talk a lot about delegation, and we've had two other guests on today talk about delegation, and you should delegate tasks that you don't like, or you should delegate tasks that you can make more money if you paid somebody less money than you make an hour or charge an hour. But but really helping the person that you delegate the task to understand the responsibility and opening a line of communication is ultimately what is going to help that person do the best job possible with that delegated task, because they're no longer just doing a task. They have a responsibility that they can sort of cultivate, and it becomes part of their job role, right? Everybody sort of wants to grow in their role. I shouldn't say everybody. Most people inside of a law firm want to grow their role just by virtue of wanting to grow as a person. And I think that that's one of the most insightful things I've ever heard is to delegate the responsibility, not the task. Something that I find shocking is that during our last conversation, I still am not over this. You told me that you're an introvert, and very much so, which I think is incredible to hear because you do a lot of public speaking and you have a pretty big online presence. So I'm curious what your advice might be to other attorneys who might identify as an introvert, because I think that that's sort of par for the course when it comes to a lot of attorneys. What advice would you have to an introverted attorney on building their brand and marketing themselves?
Yeah, so this is a great one. I actually, on our YouTube channel, we actually have videos specifically about how to network as an introvert because I had to learn it and it was tough. I I was shy as a younger person, but I grew out of being shy probably by the time I was 30. But even then, I always felt very drained by having to go out and shake hands and kiss babies, if you will. So for me, it was really about finding an activity that I could do where people could become aware of me, right? That's the goal of marketing, to increase the awareness and ultimately put out the message that is necessary for your ideal client avatar or referral source to become enamored with you such that they reach out for help. So in order to do that, you don't have to be at a large party where you're having 1,500 conversations in the course of a day. You don't have to drain your energy in a way that doesn't feel natural for you. You can network, you can market in a host of different ways. And I think the advent of digital marketing in particular has made that much easier. Public speaking for me has always been something that is unidimensional. And what I mean by that is I am giving out. So while I am certainly observing as people are listening, I'm looking for eyes and making sure that people aren't on their phones. I'm asking questions and seeing that people are raising their hands and shaking their heads. And certainly there are times where people ask me questions. For the most part, I am pouring out, right? I'm giving information, I'm training, I'm educating. That to me is the same as me talking to one judge or one client or one adversary. It's a one-to-one communication. That's how I treat it, right? That's why a lot of people have said that when you're speaking on stage, they feel that they are the person to whom I'm speaking, even though there could be 1,000 people in an audience. For me, that actually preserves my energy. So how can I take that and make more of it? Well, the great thing that we have now is that people can video themselves. And if you video yourself, whether you're speaking electronically or you're speaking, you're speaking on stage, you can video yourself and then you have multiple pieces of content. And another thing that is a really great asset right now is that we have artificial intelligence that can transcribe what you are saying. So if you and I are having this conversation right now, right, we're recording in Zoom. Zoom actually now includes a transcript feature. You can actually get the transcription directly in your Zoom meeting or webinar. But assuming that you didn't want to use Zoom, there's Otter.ai, there's Sonics.ai. There's all these artificial intelligence platforms where for $10, you can get an hour worth of transcription. It's unheard of, right? And it takes a little bit of time to correct it to make sure that all of the words came out clearly. But once you do that, you then have content that can go on your website. You've got information for your email drip sequences. You've got content that's going to be available for your pamphlets when people are talking to you. And you put that together with a graphic. You can even do this in a homemade setting until you ultimately have the resources to outsource it. You have so much usable information so that you can get people aware of who you are and what you stand for. And it doesn't take a lot of interaction one-to-one or one-to-many. You can actually do it in a one-to-one fashion that preserves your energy and really works more effectively for the introvert versus the extrovert. So I recommend that to people, but the ultimate the ultimate punchline is really just find what works for you and don't think that you have to do it a way that someone else did it, because I built a multi-million-dollar law firm hating going to networking events. And at some point I just refused to do it. I said, it's taking more out of me than it's giving back to me. I'm much more effective when I get to be left alone. So, that's how I did it.
I think it's important to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. I think, so my wife will always say to me, because she's extremely shy and extremely averse to public speaking. She got a new job about a year and a half ago. She works for a really large, like Fortune 500 company, and she has to give presentations to like members of her organization. Yeah, we got Zoom bombed. So if that's what you're reading, the participants can't see that. That's never happened to me before. And I watched it in real time, and it shocked me greatly, I have to tell you. So I very quickly kicked that person out.
You really ought to share with the audience what we're watching, because I was thinking, interesting comment, and I was really sitting here contemplating how to respond to that exactly on this.
So the only people who have access to this are people who, I've never been Zoom bombed before like that, Lisa. I got to tell you, it was very disconcerting to me.
Let's just say it was not for the PG-13 and below crowd.
Yeah, no, that was rated R and not really in English. Yeah, NSFW, Joe. Thank you very much. And so what I was saying is, I love to mess with the trolls. My wife will always say to me like, "Oh, I'm so jealous that like you can just effortlessly talk to people and you can put yourself out there." And like Allison mentioned, like the shake hands and kiss babies, and it doesn't actually work like that. I think even for extroverted people, like it is very draining to be on all the time. We were talking about this in the chat earlier today. So it is important to take that time for yourself and not just purposely just like give. It is important to understand that maybe what you're good at is appearing behind the scenes or only giving speeches that go one way, right? But I know that you're the law firm mentor, and you're always a great person to turn to for advice. But can you remember the best piece of advice that someone gave you on running a law practice?
Oh God, the best piece of advice. I've gotten so much advice over the years. That's a really challenging question. I would probably say, I remember this was my law mentor. It was somebody who taught me a lot about family law in particular. And I've always been able to call him up. I will say to him, John, can I take you out for breakfast? And he says, sure, let's meet up at my country club. And he never lets me pay for breakfast, even though I'm always taking him out and he's always paying. That's a thing, but like,
True. Mentor.
I benefit from the thing, right? So, but he told me when I had just started my law firm and I was getting to the point of being overwhelmed. This was before the near-death accident. He told me, you're in both the best position and the worst position for someone who runs a law firm. The best position because you don't have kids, you're not married, you can devote all the time to building everything out, to creating what you want, to designing it your way. And the worst position because you're not married, you don't have kids. So you can spend all your time doing nothing but building a law firm. And he said, one of the things that is probably the thing that will both kill you and will make you extremely successful, right? It's the law of polarity. The best of you is also the worst of you and vice versa. Is that when you are desiring something, you have to give yourself time away from it in order to recharge yourself for it. So, I've always been a workaholic. There's a whole lot of holics in my background. I have an addictive personality, but all of the things I've overcome, workaholism is the one that always comes back. Like alcoholism didn't come back, right? Shopaholic didn't come back, right? All that stuff I got under control, but workaholism is really, really hard to avoid because I love my work. So when I'm mad, I work. When I'm happy, I work. And I have to stop myself. That was the thing he told me to do. He said, even when you love it more than life itself, You have to allow yourself time away from it so that your perspective is always sharp, right? If you never get yourself out of the helicopter, then you're just seeing the tops of the trees. You're never seeing the leaves on the ground. And if you just stay on the ground looking up at the treetops, you're never going to see what the top looks like. You're never going to see that big sea of green staring back up at you. There's always going to be a lack of perspective. So you have to go in and out of your business. And that in and out can be taking yourself on, long staycation weekends. It can be, just zooming out. Like there are times where I'm just like, I think I need a little break here. We're just going to do a Netflix and chill by ourselves. Now I'm in a relationship. So sometimes it's Netflix and chilling with the fella. But, the point is I have to pull it back. And I got that advice. And I followed that advice. I had such a respect for this mentor that I took the first vacation that I had taken in 7 years, the 6-month anniversary of my law firm. It hadn't even been open a year yet. I was like, you know what? This is time to actually practice this now. And I forced myself to go on a vacation. And this is what I did. This is before I was even truly, truly a systematized business, right? I had some policies and procedures, but we were still kind of flying blind on a lot of stuff. I had a secretary and an associate attorney. And I told them both, here's the thing. I'm going on vacation. If anything goes wrong, you're not allowed to use my cell phone. No one is allowed to call me. If something goes wrong, you have to call the resort. That means Becky is going to get on a golf cart to come hunt me down somewhere in a pool. And if I get out of the pool because somebody on a golf cart came and found me and it's not an emergency, you're fired. And I wasn't joking. And they realized it. Now, this in hindsight was probably not the best way of handling it because my associate, we actually had a snowstorm. I was in Arizona. My law firm's in New Jersey. We had a snowstorm and my associate was like, oh my God, the snow is getting really bad. Can I go home early? And he started texting me. Now, luckily, I was at the spa, so I didn't see the text. I didn't care. But I got back to my office or got back to my casita and looked at it. And I was like, oh my God, he's been going crazy. It's a snowstorm. And then by the end, there was like 15 text messages. By maybe text message number 7, he was like, oh shit, I forgot I wasn't supposed to text you. Please don't fire me. And then I got like a whole host of please don't fire me text messages that was unfortunate. But the point was made, right? Everybody got it. Like whatever it is, handle it. I'm gone. And I didn't even trust that they could handle it at that point. But I said, you know what? If they can't handle it, God can handle it. I am not going to lose my license because I'm gone for a week. Life will go on. And life goes on. And that forcing that for myself to do that, this workaholic, this control freak who had to have everything her way, that one little piece of advice from my mentor, 2 weeks later, I was gone on a very, very extended, very expensive vacation. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. It really set the tone for everything going forward.
I think it's important to recognize that, what you said, that you can't constantly be on and that you always need a different perspective, because when you're too deep into the thing, you're only looking at it from that one angle that you're in. And you need time to be restored. So I like the idea of a vacation, but I'm a big, I don't like to travel. I hate traveling. I hate planes. I hate long car rides. I'm a big stick in the mud and I really like my house. So I'm a big staycation guy. I just stay home and watch TV with my wife and my dog. And that's the best thing that I can do for myself. But I do want to ask you something fun because this came up earlier and somebody in the chat knew one of the names of your birds. So this is a fun way to end this because we're coming up on the end. So is it true that one of the birds' names is Versace? Okay, so they got one. What's the other bird's name?
The other bird is my first bird. It's Maximilian, and we call him Maxie.
Maxie and Versace. I love it. So Allison, before I let you go, I just want to ask you if our viewers today would like to connect with you further, how can they go about doing so, and where do they go?
Yeah, well, there's lots of places to find us. Of course, our website is lawfirmmentor.net. We also, as you mentioned earlier, have a podcast. It's called the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. You can either listen to the podcast on our website at lawfirmmentor.net/podcast, or we're on all the platforms, right? We're on Apple, Stitcher, Google, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, we're on all the social media platforms. So lots of places to find us. We have a lot of free content. We offer a lot of free assets to the legal community. And I tell people all the time, I know there are people downloading my stuff that are working with other coaches or that don't know anything about growing a business and don't know that they want to. It's purely exploratory. We don't do hard selling. We don't sell in our email. We're really about letting people know what we stand for and how we help lawyers. And if that appeals to you and you want to learn more about how we can help you in your law firm, you can always book a call with a growth strategist on our team at our website, lawfirmmentor.net.
To reiterate for the final time, I can't believe it. Anybody who registered and is watching this, there should be links below if you're watching this on YouTube, and you will receive an email if you registered. If you're here, or if you're, I don't know, whatever the case may be, you will get links to all of our guests' information, offers, contact information, and all of that. So Allison, thank you so much for joining us today and being the final guest and wrapping our law firm summer reboot camp up. We'd also once again like to thank the Legal Burnout Solution for sponsoring today's conversations. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you who attended any of the conversations over the past 3 days. We hope you learned a ton, because I know I personally did selfishly. And we will be making the recordings of all 10 of our live conversations available for viewing soon. So keep an eye out for an email from me personally. And Allison, just thank you again. I am going to go sleep for like 3 days now.
Well, I'm sure it's well-deserved and well-earned. Thank you, everyone, for listening, paying attention. Thank you, Nick, for having me. It's been a blast.
Allison, always a pleasure to speak with you. And I hope you have a great evening and weekend.
All right. Same here. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.